Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you today how to do our little Olympic rings that we're doing out of Delicas and 15-0 seed beads. You can do this as a bracelet. You can attach chain, which is what I'm going to do to this one, and attach chain to it and make it into a necklace. You can also stretch them out and make it into a linked bracelet as well. So you don't need to do the Olympic rings. I just thought this time of year, if you're watching the video right away, it is Olympic season, and we've been watching the Olympic Games, and we'd like to see kind of your Olympic flair as well, if you want to let us know what you've been doing. For this, you are going to need 5 different colors of your Delicas. I have a blue color here, a yellow, black, green, red. It's just opaque red, opaque green, the opaque black. For the opaque yellow is really, really bright, so I used a lustered yellow, and then the blue was really bright, so I used a blue matte as my Delica bead. For my 15-0 that I'm using on the inside, I'm going to be using my silver lined crystal beads, and these are in the 15-0s. You could also use a silver bead, you can use a gold bead. If you have a lot of 15-0s that also match the colors of the ring, you could use those as well. It will be easier having an alternating color of the 15-0s to kind of pick up what you're doing. In addition to our seed beads that you'll need 2 English beading needles, and I have size 10 English beading needles. I'm using .006 wildfire beading thread in frost to go with my beads, especially with my silver lined. And then I have a thread burner to burn the ends of my thread, and I did use my needle nose pliers. As always, I use them to kind of flatten out the ends of my thread as I'm stringing them onto my wire or onto my needles. So we're going to start by making the rings. I am going to make ahead of time the blue, black, and red rings because those are made independent, and then the yellow and green rings are linked into it. So grab out your Olympic colored beads so that way we can make the Olympic rings. So I already have my 3 rings started, and when you look at the Olympic symbol, it's going to be blue, black, red, yellow, and green. You can do your blue, your black, and your red ahead of time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to link our yellow and link our green into those. So I'm going to start with my yellow. And I have a yellow Delica bead, and the yellow I'm using is transparent yellow. I've used opaque red, I've used black, and I've used a frosted matte blue color. When I get to the green, it's going to be the opaque green. So I'm going to start out with my 15-0s. And again, they're just a silver lined crystal color. And I have my 2 needles onto my 1 piece of thread. I've cut about 24 inches of thread. And I'm going to start off with the middle. What you do with these is you start off with the middle row. Because I'm having to link in, even though I made these individually and the step is going to be the same, what I'm going to have to do is link in first. So I'm going to create my loop, and then we're going to link into that blue and black ring there. To start, I'm using 2 needles. You can do this with 1 needle or 2. And I'm going to put 1 bead on 1 needle, 1 bead on the other. This is a fast 2-needle peyote, it's called. I'm going to let those drop down to the end of my thread. After I have 2 beads at the end of my thread, I'm going to put another bead on. This bead is going to go through 1 needle and then through the other needle. I'm going in the same direction through the needles. What's going to happen then when you get down to the end is you're going to have your first little step of peyote. So you're actually doing 3 rows at once. You're going to have 2 beads and then 1 bead, and we're going to continue with that because we're doing the 2 needles the whole time. So I'm going with 1 bead on each needle, letting those drop down next to the ones already started. And I'm going to keep and make sure that I stay to the middle of the thread here, and that creates a little X, and it's hard to see a little bit with that crystal color, but it's 2, 1, 2. And for my next rotation, I'm going to put on 1 15-0, let that drop down, and then put the other needle through in the same direction. I'm going to continue that until I have 40 passes of doing this. So you're going to end up with, when you count your rows, you're going to end up with 40. So if you would count on a zigzag, you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So right now I have 4 long, and I'm going to get the whole way to 40, going with 2 on each, and then 1, 2, and then 1, 2, and then 1. And again, we're going to continue this the whole way, and that's going to be our first 3 rows of peyote with our 15-0 silver lined crystal. So I now have 39 beads on, a row of 39. And when you're looking, again, you're counting along that zigzag. So I'm looking at every other bead, counting how long it is. I have 39 beads, and one thing you want to make sure is that you're putting on and you're ending opposite of the way that you started. So we started with 2 beads, and we're going to end with 1. So to end, all we're going to do is put our needle through 1 bead, going in the same direction. And that's going to finish our project off here. That's going to finish our 15 O's. So after that portion, when you're 50 wide, you are going to be done with your 15 O's. So I can move those off to the side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to link them into my blue and my black ring. Normally when you are just creating the first rings that you don't need to link into, what you can do is you can just create this off and you don't have to worry about linking it in. Because I am creating it on the ring, I need to tuck my rings into my loop that I'm making. So they're going to sit right inside there and hang out. What I'm going to do is now is round out this. So I'm almost creating a link chain, and that's going to create my yellow that's going to link to the blue and the black. Once I have them linked in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the needle that is on the right side, so you want to make sure not to have it twisted. And the needle that's on the right is going to go back through the first bead that is on the right. So it's going from the end all the way around back through the first bead. And I'm going to pull that nice and tight, and that's going to link it together. I'm going to go the same thing with the left needle, and that's going to go back through the bead that was on the left side. And again, this is going to close up that loop. And pull nice and tight now with both. And there you have the start of your ring right linked into the other 2. My needle that's on the left I'm going to come back and work with, but for now all I do is I poke it into my bead mat so that way I don't poke myself. And I'm going to let that hang out there, and I'm going to work strictly from the right. So I have my 11-0 Delicas here in my yellow color. And what I'm going to do is start peyote now. So if you have never done peyote, you might want to stop this video, check out our other peyote video. But what we've done at the start with our 15 O's is set up a row, basically 3 rows of peyote. Peyote has an unevenness to it, so that way what we're going to do is we're going to put on 1 more bead, and we're going to go through the 15-0 that's sticking up. That 11-0 is going to fit right inside there then. Again, we're going to pick up the Delica, and we're going to go through the next 15-0 that's sticking out a little bit. Because remember, you have the rotation of 1, then 2, then 1, then 2. So we're always linking into the space where there are 2 beads and putting the Delica next to the single bead row that we created. And I'm going to continue the whole way around my circle. You can rotate it in your finger so that way you don't have to work inside the ring, because it's more difficult to try to fit your needle in there. But I'm going to keep it going here all the way around, adding my beads. You should have 20, because we did 40 rows wide. You should be adding 20 beads at a time now. So I should be adding 20 of my yellow beads. So I have my beads going on here, and I'm adding 20 yellow ones in the place. I'm going to continue on, going the whole way again, adding these yellow. And then once I get the whole way around, I'll show you how to step up a row. But I'm going to continue again, adding those Delicas in between my 15s. So I'm here back at the start where I have one more of my 11O Delicas to add. And I'm adding that in. I'm going through my first 15O that I was coming out of. That's going to complete the 20 on. What you want to do to step up a row is actually take your needle and you're going to go through the first of the Delica beads that you added onto your project. Once I do that, I'm going to continue another row of the Delica beads in these little grooves here. I'm going to add one more Delica bead as we go. So I'm continuing with my peyote stitch, adding another bead into every little step hole that there is. I'm going the whole way around now, adding those 15Os, or I'm sorry, the 11Os. So you're going to end up with 2 rows after this of your 11O Delicas in the yellow color, and we're just going on the one side right now. Remember, our other needle is tucked in on the left, and we're not worrying about it right now. We'll pick that up in a little bit, and we'll work from that as well. And I'm going to continue on putting 20 more of those Delica beads on for my second row of peyote. So I've gone around now with 19 beads. I'm on my 20th bead, and I'm going to go through that last one on the first row that I need to go through. And then at the same time, I'm going to bump up to step up through my first bead that I put on in row 2 of the yellow Delicas. I'm going to continue one time around again for a third row. So I'm going to have 3 rows total on this right side with my yellow seed beads. And you're going to notice that this is not staying in its circular shape. It's kind of going oblong. Again, I like to have my finger in there. I think it's easier to work with. But you're going to just add a third row to your project, going the whole way around with your yellow. So I've gone ahead now and I've finished off my third row, going through the last bead in the second and then the first bead that I've put on the third. I'm actually done with this side now, so I'm going to tuck my right needle into my bead mat. If you want, you can even take it off. That's up to you. I'm going to pick up my left needle now that has just been kind of hanging out waiting for me. And I'm actually, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to switch that needle that was on the right to the left, and I'm going to work on the right. I'm going to do the same thing on the right-hand side, and I'm going to be going right around doing my first row of peyote with my Delicas. Because remember, after we did those first 3 rows where we were using the 2 needles of our 15Os, we're done the 15Os. So now I'm going to swing around to the other side here. And it's going to make somewhat of a tire effect. Because the 15Os are smaller, they naturally want to go towards the middle. And that's how we're going to get those to the middle of our ring. We're basically building up the sides of the ring that we're then going to seam together right in the middle. So you're going to continue doing 2 rows of the yellow. So we did 3 on the other needle. I'm going to do 2 on this one. So I'm going around here for the first, and then I'm going to pick up and do another one as well. So I'm getting ready to add my 20th Delica here on row 1 of the second side. I'm going to go through my last 15O, and at the same time I'm going up through the first 11O that I put onto my project. Pull nice and tight, and that's my first row. And again, I'm going to do one more row of my peyote on this side. So I'm going to continue with the peyote, doing one more on this side. It sometimes can get a little tight, so make sure that you're pulling your beads so that way they sit nice and tightly in the space and you're not left with extra thread showing. I'm just going to continue again with our second row on this side. And then we get to have the fun and seam them up together to start to actually see what it's going to look like. So I'm getting ready now to put my final bead in. On my second row, I'm going to go through the first bead on row 1 to do that. And then again, I'm going to go through, just like I was stepping up, the first bead that I put on in row 2. What we're going to do now is actually fold these two together, and that's why I was saying it kind of creates a little bit of a tire effect. And you do the exact same thing again when it's just the rings and you don't have the link in. You're doing the same thing, but you don't have to kind of work around the links that are already there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my needle that's on the left or right, doesn't matter which one you start with, and all we're going to do is zigzag our seam together. So we have an odd number of peyote. We did 3 on one side and 5 on the other. And we're going to take our needle from left to right, picking up the beads, and you're going to pull it, and it's going to create a really seamless line. And you're going to just switch, going from the left side to the right side, going through every other bead that's sticking up. So you're zigzagging back and forth. And that's going to create that little seam there to make a nice seamless line. So you're basically just sewing up the seam. And you can see then it really pushes the 15s down to the end and down in the middle. And it really does create a nice seamless line. So you can see what we've done so far, creating the seamless line versus the opening here that we're just snaking back and forth, going right to left. I'm going to continue doing that the whole way around my project, picking up the beads that are sticking up on the right, then the bead that's sticking up on the left, pulling nice and tight and grabbing those together. And we're going to continue that the whole way again around my loop and circle, so that way it closes it off just like the others, nice and tight. So I'm right here at the end where I want to pick up some of my beads here and get them the last seam that I'm going to put together. And what I'm going to do is continue just like I was, going now to the right, and then I'm also going to go to that left bead there, pull that, and now I'm completely seamed up, so I have that nice ring that I've created. And there's the start of my Olympic rings here. So there's our start. We're going to be adding the red at the top and then a green at the bottom. And what I'm doing to tie these off is you want your thread and needles to come out right next to one another. So I'm going to take this thread and needle here and bring it back towards the other. I'm going to drop down a row of my peyote, and it's a tight fit with these size 10 needles, but I prefer to use the 10s rather than the 12s. And once my threads are coming out right next to each other in beads that are sitting right next to each other, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie right over left. I switch hands, which also makes it tied left over right, and give it a nice tight pull. And then I'm just going to take my thread burner and I'm going to burn that down in order to get ready to add my green loop on. So the next thing that I need to do is create my green loop. The green loop is going to be the exact same as the yellow, the red, the black, the blue. What I do need to do is hook that one into the blue and the black. So I need that green ring to be sitting down below the red ring and the black ring. So to do that, I'm going to link into the black and the red as well when I'm doing my green ring. So again, to start with my green ring, all I'm going to do is proceed like I did with the yellow, with 2 needles, putting 1 15-0 on each needle and letting that drop down to the end of my thread. Then I'm going to put another 15-0 on where I put the needles both going through the same direction. Again, if you know peyote and you want to start with 1 needle, you can start that way as well. And then you would just start in the middle of your thread, stringing on 40 beads. But I'm going to go on here and continue on doing 2 on one side, 1 on the other, till I've done that 40 times basically. This would be time number 3. Number 4 will have 1 bead. And sharing the needles, going both back through in the same direction. And then up here to stop and pushing it down on the end, making sure when you get down there, again, that it gets set up in that 2-1, 2-1 figure. So I'm done basically my 40 rows wide, counting on an alternate, counting each row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right down along the rows. And I'm done 40 of those. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to link them together. Again, my green beads are going to link the red and the black together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate my needles, one to the right, one to the left. I'm going to take my section here. I'm going to go up through the black, through the back of it, link onto my red here, taking my needles through. Through my red loop. And then I'm going to take my 1 needle and go through the first bead on the opposite side on the right needle. And I'm going to go through the other bead with my other needle. And that's going to bring that loop together. And that's going to close up my gap between my red and my black. Now what I get to do is add in my green beads. And to add in my green beads, I'm going to continue with peyote. I'm just going to start with one side. I'm going to add a green bead in. I'm going to continue again right along the peyote track. The green are just going to sit nice and inside those 15 O's. You're just going to add 1 bead and sew through the next, and it's going to look like little green teeth almost here, going right along my line. And as you go along, we're going to go down the one side with our green, and then we're going to go down the other side and then seam it up and close it off just like we did with the yellow and like I had previously done with the other 3 rings. So I've come the whole way around my green rotation, and I'm about to add my last green bead, which would be number 20. And I'm going to go through the bead that I was coming out of, the 15O, from row number 1. This is just to show you how to step up again. Then once I'm through there, I'm going to go through the first bead that I put on the green one. So it would be the first green bead on that rotation. Again, I'm going to do a second full row of my green on this side, and then I'm going to jump over to my left side and add my left side as well before seaming it up and showing you exactly what it looks like. And we're just going to continue putting on 20 more green beads and adding them in right in that same peyote style. So to end my right side here, I'm going to put my last bead on, go back through the first green bead that was ever put on, and I'm also going to go through the first green bead in the row that I'm completing. And that's going to end on a step up. You're going to have green beads zigzagging the whole way on the right, just like we did with the yellow. Now on the left side, I'm going to pick up my needle, and your needle, as you're working with it, because it's pulling through constantly, it's going to get twisted inside your other loop, so you're just going to want to pull that out. I work better with the right than I do with the left, so I'm actually going to take my needle that was on the right, I'm going to drop that into my bead mat on the left side, and then I'm going to work with the right side, continuing this. And again, I'm only going to have to go through 1 rotation on this side, and then I get to seam it up, and you get to see exactly kind of what it looks like. So we're just going to continue with our peyote stitch, adding the green Delicas in between the 15 O's on the opposite side of our ring. There's a lot kind of hanging and going on now as you're working with it. And just continue the whole way around your loop, sewing in your green delicas. So again, we're just going to go around one more time here and kind of get ready to finish up. And then seam it all together. So I'm just going around, it's creating that tire effect as we're putting our next row on. I'm just going to pull that right along my project, spinning to do my next one right on here. And so I have my second row on this other side to create my wheel. And we're getting ready to seam it up, but what you need to do before that is to actually get an uneven number. So we have 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, and we're going to do the same thing that we did with our yellow. That's going to get that final one. When we get ready then, we're going to seam it all together and close it up. I've got my last row on there and I've done my step up, and just like we did with the others, we're going to seam it up. Take that out of my loop here. I'm just going to go back and forth from my right side to my left. Oops, skipped ahead there. And back and forth. And after each stitch, I just grab and give a nice tight pull. It's really just showing up the line here. Again, one to the left, one to the right. And if you're not quite correct in this, you'll be able to tell as you're working on it, because it'll create a little bit of a bump on the side and it won't have that nice seamless round effect. I'm going to continue seaming this up just like we did with the others the whole way around till I get to my other thread. And then similar to the yellow, we're going to just tie a knot together. And again, I did this for the black and blue and red rings. Those are a little bit easier to do because you're not having to link into anything. And once I get the seam done here, then we'll get to lay it out too. So again, I'm just going to continue seaming up the other half of my green ring. So I'm on my last stitch here, and my 2 threads are going to come out of the same bead. And then what I'm going to do to exaggerate this stitch is actually go on to the first bead that I went through. And that's going to pull it nice and tight. I'm going to back down the bead that's next to it on the side, and that's going to bring my threads out right next to one another. So all I have to do is just tie a knot, pull nice and tight, and then I can glue it or just burn it down. For this case, I'm just going to burn it down. Take my thread burner here, and burn down that knot. I'm going to set up my rings here so that way I have my nice little formation here of my Olympic rings. So you can play around with these. You could do a bracelet. They are going to lay just as if they were linked. If you do want them to lay a little bit flatter, one thing I believe I said already was that you could actually sew them to one another, that you could sew this yellow on top of the black and the blue, so that way it sits on top of it rather than sitting kind of inside of it, so that way it wouldn't have that same effect. I like it just as this. It kind of makes it look fun to have it linked in. And like I said, you can also make a necklace or bracelet in the same fashion, linking your O's together and creating kind of a one-of-a-kind piece. But this was just to get us a little bit into the Olympic spirit and into the international flair. We have a lot of international people that watch, as well as a lot of international people that purchase from our online store. So thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you're enjoying the Olympic Games and get a chance to make some of these Olympic rings in the different colors. You could also make them in the flag colors of your nation as well. So hopefully you learned something new. Again, enjoy the Olympics, and thanks a lot for watching.